the right place. I can't believe we're almost done. We're at Tsade today. We are in Psalms 119, 139, 38, 137, 137 through 144. And what a beautiful picture of humility we're going to talk about today. And it's really interesting to see how closely does pride and humility, it's kind of like pride has two sides of the coin. And a lot of times we think the opposite of pride is humility, but sometimes we're going to see what we think the opposite of pride is, or what sometimes people will see it's still pride. It's not really pride and humility. Humility looks a little bit different. And sometimes we can maybe be a little bit, we'll get into that in a little bit. So how about I'll share that live. So let me share my screen. Let's get the party going. Yes, this is going to be good. And anyway, so here we again, I put all the different ways that I found so far. If you have some new ones, please put them in here. All the things and all the ways that you think you can spell a Tsade, right? Sadiq is actually the way that most Jews, most rabbis will pronounce this section. They'll pronounce it as Tsade. Tsade is how they will pronounce it. Well, you can see all the spellings. Most of us understand that the spellings are very phonetic. So anyways, and then I think this was one of my favorite ones now. Let me know if you can't hear it. Should hear birds only. Don't know how many of you, if you find some other songs, keep looking for new ones so we can all experience, some of us like different channels on the radio. So finding some different ones for you to be able to tune into to find maybe the artist or the psalmist that you really love, because again, there's different ways going through this class. If you're just hopping in here and we're on Tsade, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 more classes to go. And we have finished up Psalms 119, but these have all been recorded and they're all in your library. And I do put the video links in there for all the ones that we have found so far. there's ways that you can go deeper into this class. So I'm going to go over it every week just so that we can start out by just showing, you can just show up and say, I'm just going to show up and just listen. A couple of you are like, hey, I'm doing some stuff with the kids today, so I tuned in live and I'm just going to listen. That's fantastic. Then some of you are like, no, I'm really been going through this whole class, or I want to start from the beginning and I want to go through the whole thing, either alone with a friend, or I want to maybe do it as a homeschooler with my kids. So you start at the beginning and you go through and you do the class. We have the word studies on under every letter. If you go to the downloads in your library, you can download that and print it and go through and do the word study. So each two, I have it done by each letter under each 8 sections. And then and then I have letters, and I have 2 verses at a time on there. So you can print those off and you can go through that. Then if you want to take it a little bit deeper, you can go through and memorize those 8 verses, whether we've give suggestions on putting it up on a board and erasing little parts. You know, maybe each week you're memorizing 8 verses and you write them all out and you erase as you go throughout the week until you've memorized it before you know it. The other thing to do would be listening to these songs over and over so that you're committing it to your heart, you're committing it to memory. And as we know, I mean, we're committing this English version of a Hebrew text to memory. So which version do you memorize? Whichever one is easy for you to. If you could memorize the whole thing in Hebrew, wouldn't that be like we're going 3 levels deep there? But just so that you have an understanding, if you memorize it to the point where you're like, I know this is what he's saying. And then the next level would be taking that letter, the letter that's associated with that section of verses, and digging into that. And we know that we have a course already intact right now. Brenda Stroth does a beautiful course in that. It's called Discovering the Energy of the Letters. What is the energy of the letters? It's where's Yeshua? What am I? What's my story? It's not some woo-woo mystical thing about these letters. The energy is like, what are they saying on the page? What did our Creator want to tell us in each of these letters? And what's beautiful is as you learn each one of these letters, they come around and you see it and you're like, oh, wow. And the word just comes alive to you. So let's hop on in. Let's do this thing, right? So again, we are in Psalms 119. We did this. Let's see if it'll let me go. No, I don't want to play again. So the theme you're going to notice through this whole thing, you're going to notice the theme is surrendering yourself to the will of the Holy One. You're going to see through each one of the verses as we go through, we're talking about surrendering. We're talking about giving up our will, giving up our ways and becoming humble. And this is just written out for you. Again, I wanted it here so you had a chance to see it. It says, you're righteous, O Lord, and your judgments are upright. You commanded your testimonies, which are righteous, and they are exceedingly faithful. My zeal incenses me, for my adversaries have forgotten your words. Your word is very pure, and your servant loves it. I'm young and despised, and I've not forgotten your precepts. Your righteousness is perpetual righteousness, and your Torah is truth. If you look in your verses, it might say your righteousness is righteousness. And it's because of those 2, righteous on righteous on righteous. I love that because it's telling us, hey, exclamation point, right? Your word righteously is perpetual. Distress and anguish, sometimes they've overtaken me, and your commandments, though, are my occupation. I love that. The righteousness of your testimonies are eternal, and they enable me to understand, and I shall live. I want you to look at, I'm going to go back just so you can see this. I want you to go back again. You see, we start each letter. Each of these is starting out as we are studying these. We notice that we're studying out that it starts with that Tsade. We're going to start in verse 137. He says, you are righteous. Is this saying that there is, I've heard some rabbis saying, well, if he's saying you are righteous, is he saying then that there's a possibility that God on the flip side is not righteous? Like if you have to state something is clean, it means there's an option that something's dirty, right? If something is black, then there's an option of possibly it could be white, if that's making sense. So is he stating like, oh God, is this saying that there's a possibility of him never being righteous or never having right rulings? No, that's not what he's saying here. That's not the type of declaration that he's making. And this might seem silly to us, but as you dig in it from a rabbinic point of view, you'll see why that is really important. So let's really look at what David says. And in Proverbs 8, we look at, if we want to know what David is really saying here, we can see what his son says in Proverbs 8, 9, and 10. He's telling us that all your words are available for understanding. So what he's saying is, your words, you are righteous. It's available even for right living for us. It's available for understanding, and everything that comes from him is righteous. His actions, his judgments, everything are righteous, which sometimes are a little difficult for us to grab onto. Then he says, because we believe in God, we believe that God is right. We don't question his mitzvah. Whoa, that's a hard one, right? We talk about the sovereignty of our King all the time. He is sovereign. When we say, oh, it's all good. That's living that emunah life. It's all good. Even when it's bad, it's good. Even when it's really bad, it's good. Why? Because we know and we believe that God is right, and we don't question his mitzvah. We don't question the way he tells us to do things, because we don't question things. Well, we might question them if you're me, but we know the sovereignty of our King, that even when it's all bad, it's all good. So Torah is a system of beliefs and actions and a way of life. I don't know why I felt like I had to put that there, but I felt like sometimes we forget that. Torah is actually a system of how we believe. If you're wondering, what is my belief system? Torah. It's that system. What was Yeshua's belief system? Torah. It was how we act. It's how we do our life. It's how it seems silly. Like, that's why we will break it down a lot practically on teaching on Friday, or when I teach on Wednesdays, is because I want you to see practically, when your ox falls in a ditch, how do we get it out? When you borrow something from someone, how do you give it back? When you're living in community, what's the practical way we do this? How do our actions, and how does Torah apply to our everyday life? And even when our soul can't believe it, God, even when my soul, David's crying out here, if my soul doesn't even believe this sometimes, you are still right. What I think does not determine your righteousness. What I think or believe, my limited view, my limited understanding does not change how right you are. And that's really easy to say when things are going really, really well, right? It's like, oh, things are going really great. It's easy for me to say, oh, God, you're right. But what about when things are not going super right? Did I skip a thing? Yeah. So I wanted you to see this for a second. Can you just imagine, maybe you've never, ever been in an operating room before. You didn't know anything about an operating room. You didn't know anything about it. You're a kid. You've never even heard of this. And all of a sudden you accidentally you turn the wrong corner and nobody caught you, and you turn into an operating room. So as you know, I was an operating room nurse. So this is the analogy you get today. If you accidentally walk in, you look and you see, might not be so weird for you now to see everybody in masks, but they're not robbing a bank. But now that's a little more normal. But a while ago, that wasn't very normal. If you walk into a room and everyone in the room is wearing a mask, there's all these sharp instruments. There's sounds and beeping that you've never heard before. You see, like, as you see, this patient is, if you could get up closer, you would see that his arms are strapped down. His legs are most likely strapped down. He's probably got a strap across his groin to keep him down for some reason. If something should happen, it keeps him steady. Okay. You can see tubes. You guys can look around. There's blood everywhere. There's bags hanging with tubes. There's lights. This would be an intimidating picture if you walked in, especially if you walked in and it was an open heart surgery and you see the chest is cracked open and you're like, what is he doing pulling at this guy's heart, and this chest is cracked opening, and why is there a guy back there stuffing things down his throat and holding onto a mask on his face? But what we don't know is these people are saving this person's life. Maybe if he is having an open heart surgery and they're bringing life to this person, because all we have is this quick snapshot, right? A quick little snapshot of what's going on here. We don't know the bigger picture. All we're seeing is what looks really, really scary, and the crazy hats. What if we only saw a small portion of your life? I mean, at any given time, we just took a quick snapshot. How would we judge it? Would we think that God was merciful if we saw you in your greatest pain and we took a snapshot of that, and we didn't have the broad understanding, we didn't have the 30,000-foot view, and we looked in it? Would we see his mercy in it? Would we see his plan or his grace? And sometimes do we have a tendency to look at others and take a snapshot of their life? Oh man, We don't see the big picture. All we see is a snapshot of that operating room, and it's scary, or it looks like they are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. We're seeing this little snapshot of something that's going on in their life, and we don't see what that great surgeon's plan was. We don't see the major blockage that he's removing in the midst of all of the blood and guts and all the things that are all around, and the beeping and the noise and the things that are scary and confusing. We don't see his plan, and we don't see his grace, not only in our own lives, but often in others' lives. Or do we need to know the bigger picture before we even say he's righteous? Are we able to say, God, you are righteous, when we're looking at our mess, when we're looking at the picture that all he's letting us see? He's only letting you see that little moment right now, and he doesn't let you know that big picture. Are you still able to say, you're sovereign and you're righteous, and I trust you? I don't know which is harder, my own life or when I'm doing that with someone else. So again, we use the word emunah, however you want to say it. But his word is righteous, and it's filled with faithfulness. And our lives are so full of faithfulness. Foundation, this is really a foundation for agriculture. I can do all things. I can plant the seed. I can water the seeds. I can grow the seeds. I can do all the things for the seeds. And then I have to hope for the growth of it. I have to hope for the harvest. That's emunah. That's what we do in our life. That's why we see Yeshua using so many agriculture terms when he's talking about, when he's doing parables. He's speaking to something they would understand, is that process of where you're doing all the work and then you sit back and pray for the Lord of the harvest to bring the growth. That is emunah. That's what we do in our lives. We do all the things we know to do. David's saying, I trust your mitzvah. I trust that if I do all these things, that you are good. You are righteous. See, the person of faith, they can have questions. They can have questions about what's going on in my life. The difference is the person who doesn't have any faith, they don't have any answers. We have answers. We can ask the questions, and we do have the answers. And that leads us right into that emunah, into that place of gratitude. If any of you read the Shalom Arus books, they will rock your world. You hear me say that every time I bring them up. They're very rabbinical. So I was just put that warning out in advance. Shalom Arus, if you read any of his books, the garden books, Garden of Gratitude, the Garden of Emunah, it will rock your world, because he's going to teach you that you have to be thankful even when things don't go the way that you want them to go. You have to find a place of being grateful and know that he is good in the middle of all of that. Even when we don't see the big picture, like I said, even when we just see that operating room. So in verse 139, there's a word in there. It's called timsazne. I can even say it right. It's really hard to say. Everybody practice now. And I wrote this phonetically, right? In Leviticus 25:23, we see a similar word, that has kind of the same root. And yeah, all of you guys, you'd think after a year I'd get this down better, trying to use my mouse. It's used in zika. It's like to sever or to break. In Leviticus 25:23, it's similar to that word, zika. In one translation, in verse 139, it says, I am zealous for your words, and it breaks me for those who have forgotten your word. I'm curious if you guys look in your verse, in your 119, 139, what does yours say? Mine says, my ardor has consumed me, and my adversaries have forgotten your words. That's what mine says. I'd be curious to see what word is used for you. Is it say, I'm zealous? I'm zealous for your words. But the bottom line is this word in Hebrew that he's trying to get across is it breaks me. Like it breaks me. My anger almost finished me off. It destroys me and breaks me into pieces. I don't know how in your vernacular, if you ever, gosh, that broke me up. That just breaks me up. That breaks me apart. Man, I'm broken about that. That's what he's saying. He's saying it's killing me to see them act like you never gave your word to us. David's explaining his anger, and he goes on in verse 140. He's explaining his anger, that it's rooted. It's not like I'm angry just to be angry. His anger is rooted in his deep love, and that's the difference. And as I move things around on here, that's what will cause my mouse to be crazy. This hate cannot be your definition. Okay. So it's not like, I hate this. Like my husband had this conversation listening to certain news programs. It sometimes can trigger you to use maybe terms that you maybe say things like, I hate that. I hate when that happens. I hate that. The difference is David's not talking about that. He's not talking about a hate that's rooted in that, the same, like, I hate when that happens. He's talking about, it's this hate that's rooted. This definition is that he loves something so much that it's the reason he's upset for the thing that is against it. Like, if something happened to your child, you would hate that because you loved your child so much it was coming against them, so you're protecting something you love. If you guys see the difference, the motivation is love, not this. The motivation is this: you just don't like something so much that you hate it. Like I hate okra, boiled okra. I can eat it in some other things, but I hate boiled okra because I hate the sliminess of it. I don't like it. And anyway, so I'll be like, oh, I hate okra. Now, I don't hate okra because I love broccoli so much it makes me hate okra. Do you guys see the difference? You need to love something so much that when something comes against it, the righteousness indignation comes up in you. And this is what he's saying. He's not just randomly hating some stuff. It's righteousness. We love righteousness. We love justice. We love truth. We love his word. So when something comes against righteousness, or it comes against justice, or it comes against truth, or it comes against his word, then we can say, I hate the injustice that's happening because it's coming against something I love so much. You see, so we naturally hate the things that come against that. It's not, again, not about David's anger, but about his love for God and his word that has annihilated him truly. We get frustrated. And we're here. We get frustrated when we see someone making their life a mess. When you love someone so much and you just hate seeing them make such a mess of their life, that's the difference. I know if you have adult children, you get what I'm saying, that you just love them so much. And it's just breaking you up that you see them doing something that's just against everything that you've tried to bring into their lives to be true. That's the kind of anger that he's talking about. And in 141, he says, I'm young, I'm despised, but I didn't forget. So is this thing about him being like, oh, I was a seventh son and I was the youngest. By the way, he was not the youngest. I think it's Elihu is the eighth son. So he's not actually the youngest, but he was the forgotten son. I'm going to throw this out for my biblical scholars here to let you go dig this up. There is some rabbinical sources that say that his paternity was in question. So I'll just thought that's the reason why he was not brought in. I'll just put that as a question mark on you. That's always fun you guys can go dig into. Danielle, Amanda, Erica, I can hardly see who's on here. So, yeah. So is this about that? Is he saying, I'm young. I was really treated like a leftover. Is this, my dad didn't treat me, he didn't even bring me in front of Samuel when he came around. But the word is exactly Zaire. It's Hebrews 68:10. It actually doesn't really mean young. It means I was small, but to a place where I was made small. I was young. So he says, I am young. So he's holding himself as small and unassuming. And he looks down at himself in despise. Like he's saying, he's minimizing his importance. He might be king, but he is showing his humbleness. And we'll see that in this letter Tsade, how that is all about being humble. In his early life, it really served him well to be treated less. It really served him well to be treated less than others. It was really, he wasn't arrogant. He didn't have anything to be arrogant. I think that's one of the reasons why, if you think about when we celebrate Passover, it's because we have to remember where you came from. He tells us, remember that you used to be servants. When you come into a land and have servants, remember you used to be servants. Remember who you were. Like if you're a king and you're picked from like you were just all that and there's no humility in it, you come from all the great things, you're going to bring that into your ruling, right? You're going to bring that into your monarchy. Whereas He wasn't arrogant. He came in knowing where he came from. He was a shepherd boy. He came in knowing that if it weren't for the grace of God, I don't know about you, but I'm grateful for the humbling processes that God has brought into my life, so that as I am lifted into different places of leadership, I can't be arrogant because I know where I came from. And my early life served me really well. Like in David here, he didn't have to prove that he was important, because he felt that he was humble. He was small. I literally need to not do this. All right. So are you humble? This is my question this morning to all of you. Are you humble? When someone says something to you and you know it, or you sit down at a teaching, are you like, yeah, I know this. I know this. If someone's trying to tell you something exciting that maybe they learned, are you saying, oh, I know, I know? I know people who are very good at saying I know without saying I know. Oh, I know that. They're really good at it. They're super good at saying they know something, and they can do it with the best of them. I mean, I'm gonna try and think of an example. They'll be like, if I say, oh, I found that if you put a little bit of salt, it actually makes your sweet a little bit sweeter. Now, they may not say, oh, I know that, but instead they might say something like, oh, and have you tried it this way? Because this is what worked really good for me. Like they couldn't just, they couldn't learn something. They had to make sure they let you know that they know that already. And they've tried it, and this is what else they did. That's not humility. You're never able to learn if you can't put yourself in a place of where you just don't have to say anything, that you just know you're humble. Make yourself small. Because if he says, if you will make yourself small, then he will lift you up. You just augment what you already know. That's what I was saying. You could add two things that you already know, and you make sure you have to let everyone know about it. And you also don't get to new levels of understanding if you think you know everything. One of the things when I'm looking at people to hire, to bring on into positions of stuff, I'm looking for someone who is telling me, I don't know, I am teachable and I'm coachable. And I don't even know what I don't know. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. That to me is someone who I know is teachable and coachable. And I can humble myself to others that know more than I do. I want to be in rooms with people who know so much more than I do, because all I want to do is learn and all I want to do is grow. That's being humble. Humility and not giving into pressure is what he's saying. I was humble and I didn't even give into pressure. He says I was small, but I didn't forget. He didn't mean like I didn't remember. We talk about forget or remember. He's not saying, but like he forgot, like he didn't remember. He's saying that his understanding was not influenced by what they were doing, not honoring Torah, not honoring the mitzvah. It did not influence his understanding. And this is about his value system that made him totally uniquely suited for this monarchy. And we see where that falls apart in other monarchies as we continue on in the story, right? In verse 142, he talks in 142, he says, your righteousness is righteousness forever. I love it. You got your righteousness. It's perpetual. Your righteousness is perpetually righteous. Like there's no end to your righteousness. It's forever. And your Torah is truth. When Judah is given the promise that no tribe will ever not be on the throne, sages say that is what he's saying. When your righteousness is righteousness forever, he's saying that your gifts are eternal, that you promised that a descendant would be on the throne, and that you are perpetually going to be consistent with what you've promised. And we see it in David's monarchy. His descendants is proof in Yeshua. In 143 and 144, we see him telling us that distress and anguish have found me, and your commands are my delight. You know, righteousness is part of your DNA. It doesn't matter what surrounds you. It doesn't matter. And that anguish, the anguish on that word, I want you to imagine it's like a squeeze, that pressure that's brought you actually to a point of pain. That's what David's saying, that there has been a pain, a distress and anguish that found me, that brought me to the point of pain, but your mitzvot are my delight. I looked up one of the oldest commentaries on this, and it referred back to Moshe when he's in Deuteronomy 28:53. And Moshe is basically talking through this section, says, hey, things are going to be bad, but then things are going to be good. There are good things, even though they're going to be bad, but these are going to be really good. He's saying he was squeezed, but he found comfort in those mitzvah. You know, there isn't really a clear transition here into 43. He's saying there's sorrow, and then it goes to joy. And there's not in verse 43. It's kind of funny, like you don't have a nice little transition. But he's really telling us that the Torah provides comfort. I don't know about you personally. When I came into Torah, and as I began, found Yeshua in Torah, and I began honoring his commandments and being focused on them, I found comfort. I found that the things that were confusing to me before were no longer, they weren't confusing. And I felt like there was an answer if I looked for it. I loved that there was black and white, and I could find the answers, and that I knew that his commandments, his mitzvot, his rulings, I knew that they were righteous, and that's what I feel like David's saying here. When things aren't going well all around, that we can actually find comfort in our love for his ways. And if we remember back in verse 92, and the scholars say that that's the reason that Rashi doesn't even have he doesn't have any type of a commentary on this verse, is because he says people would have already known this verse from back in 92 when he says, if your Torah had not been my delight, I would have perished in my affliction. So in 43, when he says, distress and anguish have found me, but your commands are my delight, he's already commented on this in verse 92, is that has to be the bottom, right? This is his Davidic strategy. Even if I get caught up in the things around me, this is how my equilibrium is going to balance out. Even if things are falling apart, good Lord, if we look around our world and spend any time in that, even with all of that happening, this is going to be the equilibrium. If we hop into this letter, this is Tsade, it's really true humility versus pride, which is interesting. And I'm going to just talk a minute about this, if you don't mind. And then we'll hop into some questions and chat. But that coin of pride, that one side of pride, it seems like we all know that when it's like, I'm arrogant, I'm puffed up, hey, I do everything right. And we have a certain thought of what we think pride looks like, but we never see pride as the other side of pride, where it's self-deprecating, self-loathing. Oh, I don't do anything right. Well, God is everything. You just know when it's not genuine, and then when you're just putting yourself down, and that's actually pride. Thinking yourself just not worth anything and putting yourself, that's not humility. That's not what that looks like. It's beautiful when we look at this letter. This idea is actually that chof, that bent humility. It's bent and squished down. And I see if I can show you kind of, I don't know if you can see my pointer here, but you can see it's squished down with the little yud connected to the top of it. That smallest letter, that hand, that humility that takes place, that yud is like that hand of God, that kuf, that kuf is bent, and that hand of God is connected, so that it's that letter that actually is connecting us, our humility, to the hand of God. And I'm going to did I stop my sharing? Yay. Perfect. This week was a little different, but I think one of the things that, again, I want us to really think about, and I'd love us to chat about, is tell me, I'm going to read our prayer, and then we'll do our Q&A, but I really want us to spend some time on our Q&A about what is really humility and what's pride, like how they look different. So just going to pray this. And again, your prayer is in your downloads in the very beginning of this class. Oh, Father, may we know that you are righteous, Jehovah, and that your judgments are upright. May we know that you have commanded righteousness, your testimonies, and your great faithfulness. May our zeal consume us, and may we not be like our foes and forget your words. May your word be thoroughly refined, and may we love it. May we no longer be insignificant and despised. May we not forget your precepts. May we know that your justice is righteousness forever, and that your truth is your Torah is truth. May trouble and anguish no longer overtake us, and may your commandments be our delight. And may we know that your testimonies are righteous forever. And may we understand that we so that we may live. Amen.